urging migrants to come to the United States. That's coming from the U.S. Border Patrol. Welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Sandra Smith.
I'm John Scott, in for Bill Hemmer. A surge of migrants heading for our southern border. And now the Border Patrol is telling Fox those ads offer to help them out and tell them how to get into this country. President Trump says Democrats are dragging their feet, hindering efforts to try to fix a system that's broken.
Having the weakest immigration laws anywhere in the world by far. And we have catch and release, and we have chain migration and visa lottery. We have things that nobody in their right mind would have. We're trying to get rid of them. The Democrats won't do it. When they used to separate children, which was done during the Obama administration with Bush, with us, with everybody, far fewer people would come. And we've been, on a humane basis, it was pretty bad. We go out and we stop the separation. The problem is you have 10 times more people coming up with their families. It's like Disneyland now.
Kevin Corke is live at the White House for us this morning. He picks up the story from there. Hey, Kevin.
Sandra, good morning to you. Without a question, this is one of the big four election year issues. We're talking about the economy and terrorism and health care and clearly immigration as well. In fact, the latter is something the president has spoken about at great length, and he did so again over the weekend at that rally over in Wisconsin, noting the need for dramatic change in U.S. policy and his way of, let's just say, engaging so-called sanctuary cities on the subject.
Last month alone, 100,000 illegal immigrants arrived at our borders, placing a massive strain on communities and schools and hospitals and public resources like nobody's ever seen before. Now, we're sending many of them to sanctuary cities. Thank you very much. They're not too happy about it. I'm proud to tell you that was actually my sick idea.
So the president talking about the political angle there, saying it was his idea. The DNC War Room saying this on Twitter. Trump gleefully admits it was his, quote, sick idea to use immigrants as pawns in his games of political retribution. Disgusting. Okay, but let's also point this out. Border Protection and Customs and Border Patrol, I should say absent the politics, Sandra, this is a devastating humanitarian crisis fraught with peril and in many cases fraud. 2,700 migrants falsely claimed that they were part of a family unit when they were apprehended between October of 2018 and March of 2019. 62% of border apprehensions are family units or unaccompanied children. That, again, according to Customs and Border Protection. White House officials say they're really hopeful that Democrats will join them in looking for a solution to this growing problem.
Others are now starting to recognize what the president's been saying all along, that we really do have a crisis at the border. And in fact, it is inhumane for us to ignore it longer. We have a number of unaccompanied children skyrocketing, the number of those individuals coming across our border being smuggled and taken advantage of and exploited.
That, of course, the position of the White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders. By the way, we expect the two Democratic leaders, Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, to be here on Tuesday. Don't forget, we expect to see the president this afternoon as the Lady Bears of Baylor, the NCAA basketball champions, make their way here to the White House. If we see it before then, I'll let you know. But until then, back to you.
You know you will. Kevin Corke, thank you. Let's bring in our A-team now. Marianne Marsh, former senior advisor to John Kerry. Bill McKern, Wall Street Journal columnist and Fox News contributor. And Brian Brenberg, chair of the program in business and finance and executive vice president at the King's College in Manhattan. Good morning to all of you. Bill, set up what's happening here. And we heard a lot from the president over the weekend. Clearly frustration on his part on getting Congress to act here.
Yeah, well, look, two things. The border is a mess. It's not orderly. And second, it can't be fixed without Congress. And this is not just a story now. It's the last 30 years. There's only so much a president can do. I think the president would be wise to lay out his offer. And then if the Democrats reject it, campaign say, well, look, I put this out here. He put out an offer before, on the wall for DACA, for regularizing the people that came in under the Deferred Action Program. I think he should do that now. I don't see any prospect of Congress, Democratic Congress, negotiating with Donald Trump before the 2020 elections on this.
Marianne, it seems like Democrats in Congress would rather battle President Trump or, avoid handing him a victory than fix the problem.
Really? Because here's the irony.
All right.
In June 2018, last year, when Republicans ran the White House, the House, and the Senate, there were two bipartisan bills to address immigration that would have tackled every single thing, every item Trump complained about in the interview you just played at the top of this segment. And then at the end, Trump decided not to sign the bill. Why? Because it wouldn't allow him to separate families. Now, here we are, a year later, the border situation is 100 times worse, and separating families was supposed to be the thing that stopped the immigration problem, and instead it failed. So what everyone should do is go
Brian's
back to the table and do the bipartisan
Well, funny that we
bill.
want to go back to last year instead of talking about what Democrats in the House could do this year. There are things that could happen right now. The problem is growing. Everybody sees it, but you're getting complete non-action out of House Democrats. Exactly to Bill's point, because they don't want to hand the president a victory. What have they proposed that we could do about it? They've spent all their time talking about how it's not a crisis. A very few have admitted, most have said there's not a crisis on the border.
Would Mitch McConnell put either one of those bills back in the Senate? Democrats would agree to it.
Why don't we try? How about we try?
Here's why. Because it included DACA, it included visas, it included a way to citizenship. Democrats would agree to that all day long.
So we're dealing with the now, and here's William Hurd, Republican, House Intelligence Committee member, on addressing the problem from the beginning. William Hurd.
The root cause is the reason the majority of these people are coming from the Northern Triangle, that's El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, is because of violence and lack of economic opportunities there. I spent 9.5 years as an undercover officer in the CIA. My hope is that we should stop this problem before it actually gets to our doorstep. We should be increasing the amount of intelligence on this kingpin human smugglers that are bringing people here.
There's the proposal. How do we get there, Bill?
Again, I think we need Congress to do it. Look, our asylum laws are not good. We've got a lot of problems, and a president can't do it with just executive action. You mentioned the other bills. Look, President Trump campaigned on his wall. It's unreasonable to expect that he's not going to insist on something for that in exchange for other things. I wish he would put it on the table now, between now and 2020. And I'm not sure that it benefits the Democrats to have the chaos at the border. I'm just not sure in this, because the president's going to say, I want to do something about it, and you don't. Well, you can't just go back to 2018. What are you going to do now? What are you offering now? They didn't take the DACA for Wall deal.
No, he didn't. He refused. He wasn't going to sign the bill, not because of the wall, but because he couldn't separate families. So, I mean, the politics of this, frankly, benefits Donald Trump more than anybody, because immigration, as you heard Kevin Corke say, is central to his reelection program. The more he can demonize immigrants, the better he does with his base.
So why not head off the president and just do something on asylum? Say, you know what, we're just going to provide more resources so we can do asylum properly and deal with this problem. But Democrats aren't even interested in doing something everybody agrees on. They could head off the president by doing that. They won't.
Go to Bill Hurd. You could fix the whole problem. He's a Republican.
Can't fix the whole problem.
Yes, you could. Because he said stop the problem before it gets here. But instead, Donald Trump has cut all the funding to those countries, which would have helped
stop the problem. That is no
We've got
way.
the A-team all fired up. We want to move on to topic 2. John?
Because a showdown is brewing in Washington. The Attorney General, William Barr, is threatening to cancel one of 2 hearings he's scheduled to attend this week on Capitol Hill, all over a dispute about the format of that hearing. Rich Edson live on the Hill. What is the disagreement, Rich?
Well, Democrats in the House Judiciary Committee, John, want to question the Attorney General, and they want to also allow their lawyers to question the Attorney General, and that's something that right now they're arguing over with the Attorney General's office about. This is something that is just part of what we've seen on Capitol Hill. The Democrats who control the House of Representatives, they've been arguing with the White House over a number of different issues, whether it's documents, whether it's questioning witnesses, and that's also something the White House addressed earlier today.
They're just acting really childish. It's almost embarrassing. Attorney General Barr will go there. He'll testify tomorrow in an open hearing. And you see the counter side to that is the House wanting to have staff and others interview Attorney General Barr. It really is outrageous the way that they're behaving.
House Judiciary Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler told CNN this weekend that the Attorney General is not going to tell the committee how to conduct its hearing, and if the Attorney General does not show, the committee will subpoena him. Barr is scheduled for 2 congressional appearances this week, Wednesday before the Senate Judiciary Committee, Republicans control that panel, and Thursday before the House Committee. House Democrats are demanding the president's tax returns and that senior administration officials testify before Congress. The White House has been fighting a number of those issues. On the Senate side, a little bit different of a tack. You've got a number of different Senate Republicans who are now beginning to investigate and look into what were essentially the origins of the Mueller report and the investigation of the special counsel, surveillance on the Trump team during the 2016 election. So you've got combating narratives here between the House side and the Senate side, Democrats controlling the House, Republicans controlling the Senate, and the White House fighting a number of those Democratic initiatives to try to get that testimony and different documents from the White House and from members of the administration. John?
All right. Rich Edson, thank you. The A-Team is back. Marianne Marsh, Bill McGurn, and Brian Brenberg. Bill, the Attorney General, William Barr, has been around the block a few times. Pretty sharp legal mind. Is he afraid of being questioned by committee lawyers, or does he just want to talk to the politicians and let them blow?
Look, this is unusual. It's not unprecedented. Committees can write their own rules, but this is unusual to be quizzed by the staffers. Look, my money's on Bill Barr. He knows what he's doing. He's a serious man. And these things are frequently a matter of negotiation. You know, the Congress asks for something, the White House resists, then they negotiate, you know, and it can take a long time.
What do you think, Brian?
How about politicians do their job? They're hired to provide the oversight. Why in the world are they outsourcing it to their committee counsel? If they can't do the job, then they should resign their post because they're not in the right spot. I think Barr is totally right here. I think it's disrespectful to his position, and I think it's an abdication of duty by the people elected to do that exact thing.
Oh, you mean like they did with Kavanaugh, who now sits on the Supreme Court
you're going back
the whole
to last
time
year.
through, like they did to Nixon, like they did to Clinton, like they've done to everybody else?
Mary, make your case. Why should this happen?
Well, because he's the Attorney General of the United States, and frankly, so far he's been acting like an accomplice. He won't provide an unredacted.
That's a pretty strong
It is.
language.
He will not. Look, he misrepresented the Mueller report, held on to it. That memo wasn't even.
I don't think he did. He did not. It's
Hold
just
on.
not true.
He is not providing an unredacted copy to Congress, which he is entitled. They're entitled to have.
I want to give equal part on this panel here because obviously a lot of the things that you just said there, Marianne, are not true.
Facts.
Yeah, I think
Those are facts.
they're not facts. Just by asserting them on television doesn't make them a fact. I think the report showed there was no collusion, and Bill Barr explained why there's no obstruction charges. And if the Democrats want to play games with them, I would bet on him. It takes a long time. Are they going to hold him in contempt? Really? Is that the way for 2020? They're still fighting the 2016 election.
No,
they're fighting a Bill Barr smear campaign. They are trying to undermine his credibility. He provided more transparency on this report than he had to.
Then why won't he give it up?
Because you've got grand jury testimony.
No,
it's
and
obviously
hold
a
on,
legal issue.
hold on. The fact is, Bill Barr never went to any judge to ask for that testimony to be allowed.
Because
he
there's
didn't
clear
even
precedent
number one.
just before he
there's precedent to do just that very thing. It has been done repeatedly through history.
So move to today. What is your case for why the question should not be asked solely by the lawmakers in that room?
I think it should be asked by both the council and the lawmakers because they can ask the legal questions. Not everybody on that panel.
Are the lawmakers not capable of asking?
They are capable, but not everybody on there is a lawyer, number one. Number two, unless and until Congress gets an unredacted copy of that, Congress, not even the American people who are entitled to it, so they can ask the right questions.
So you
and
want
get
grand jury information to be exposed?
Yes, except for those 14 cases that Mueller has referred to other courts.
Sonia, you know what this is about?
Bill and Brian, get back
This is not even about the report. This is about the Attorney General says that he's going to investigate the FBI spying into the Trump campaign, and the effort is to smear him before it.
So you're smearing the judges who,
Brian?
Not the judges.
Hold on, Marianne. Brian.
No, I'm not smearing. I think they were misled.
Look, it's very simple. Lawmakers have counsel on the committee. They can use the counsel to inform their questions, but if they can't ask the right questions, then they're in the wrong position.
One point here. FISA judges awarded those warrants.
Okay.
So you cannot, you're smearing
Well,
them
first of
right
all,
there.
Bill,
if you look
final
at the
thoughts,
judge,
Liam. Bill gets
Judge
final
Collier wrote a
here.
99-page opinion on the abuses of the NSA and FBI beforehand. And we don't know what she thinks, whether she thinks she was told the full truth by the FBI agents and DOJ who presented that. They have to act on what's certified there, and we're going to find out. And I think the effort is to smear.
Right,
That's
we're
it.
going to have to leave it there.
Thank you. All right, Fox News alert on this. The rabbi caught in the crossfire of the California synagogue attack now speaking out.
And I'm thinking to myself, this is not supposed to happen. This isn't Nazi Germany. This isn't a program. This is right here, Poway. This is our home.
The shooting over the weekend following 2 other deadly attacks on churches and mosques in recent weeks. What's behind the rise in these attacks on places of worship? The head of the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt, will join us live next.
Paul Biden holding his first major campaign rally in Pennsylvania tonight. Can he win that key battleground state in 2020? Our headliner, Sean Spicer, will join us later this hour.
Union membership, is it a winning message for 2020? Charles Payne has something to say about that. The Money Man joins us next.
Workers have to be able to organize and to fight for their rights. Let's be more specific. It has to be about, for example, banning right-to-work laws.
Fox News alert: the deadly shooting at a synagogue in California this weekend is only the latest in a series of attacks on houses of worship around the world. 1 woman was killed and 3 others injured, including a rabbi and an 8-year-old girl. Just last Sunday, the church bombings in Sri Lanka, killing 250 people. And last month, the mosque shooting in New Zealand, leaving 50 dead there. How can we combat this alarming global trend? Jonathan Greenblatt is the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League. He joins us now in studio. Jonathan, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Horrific to look back at what has just happened in recent history. What do we do about it?
Yeah, I just flew in this morning from San Diego. I got there on Saturday afternoon and spent the evening praying with Rabbi Goldstein's family. And spent Sunday mourning Lori Kay.
How are they doing?
It's very, very hard. They are thankful for the fact that, only 1 person was killed. But the loss of even 1 life is an enormous tragedy. And this, 6 months to the day of the shooting at the Tree of Life, the most violent anti-Semitic attack in American history, and on the day, yesterday, when we kick off Holocaust Memorial Week. So looking at all these things come together reminds us that anti-Semitism is a virulent and vicious problem right now in America.
But the suspected shooter also attacked a mosque, we are told, tried to firebomb a mosque a couple of weeks earlier. This is kind of an equal opportunity nutcase, it seems like.
Well, look, he is a white supremacist. His manifesto clearly identified with a series of conspiratorial ideas that have been used to persecute Jews as well as other minorities for a long time. So you're right, he's someone who's bigotry. It may start with the Jews in terms of anti-Semitism, but anti-Semitism never ends with the Jews. It's a disease. Hate will consume us all if we don't respond to it.
What can be done to combat this hate?
Well, we think there are a series of things that need to happen. So first and foremost, our leaders need to lead and speak out clearly and consistently, not only after a crisis, but every day about the values that we hold dear. Secondly, I think social media has a special responsibility here. Silicon Valley needs to not just innovate for financial returns, but it needs to work those algorithms to protect all of its users, because Facebook and YouTube and these other platforms really are the front line today in fighting hate. It's the place where white supremacists and many other kinds of bigots spread their poison.
We were just showing some of the statistics from the FBI. These are the hate crime statistics. 2017, 938 anti-Jewish, 273 anti-Islamic, 72 anti-other religion, 73 anti-Catholic. The White House, via Kellyanne Conway, on the Sunday shows over the weekend, responding to what happened over the weekend. Here's Kellyanne.
And whether there are Muslims in the mosque in New Zealand, whether they're the worshipers in Charleston, South Carolina, at the AME Church several years ago, whether you're in Sutherland Springs at a Christian service, whether you're our friends at the Tree of Life Synagogue or now in Pittsburgh and now in California, we condemn, and we have to condemn hate in all of its forms. People in this country should feel safe at all times. But particularly, I think there's something particularly onerous about being gunned down in your place of worship.
The administration very firmly speaking out against this, and John Bolton also saying in response, this is a hate crime, no doubt about it. John?
No doubt about it. When you go to a synagogue with a semi-automatic weapon with the intent to murder people while they pray, that is a hate crime, pure and simple. This wasn't just an attack. This was an attack on a Chabad, Orthodox congregation. This was an attack on the entire Jewish community. And that's the thing about hate crimes. Whether people are being blown up at churches in Sri Lanka, murdered in a mosque in New Zealand, or as was said just a minute ago, attacked at a black church in Charleston, South Carolina, these attacks on houses of worship truly are some of the most heinous acts imaginable.
I want to read for viewers something that you told the Washington Post. You said anti-Semitic attitudes have been historically low, but it's difficult now to feel anything other than alarm. Society is just more complicated. Technology has empowered individuals and has disempowered states. The battles used to be, governments, nations fighting for religion or, oppressing one people or another. These days it's individuals, and the web, the social media enables that.
I think this is one of the challenges we face today. So Silicon Valley and the innovation it's brought has benefited so many of us in lots of ways, but it's also empowered extremists in a manner that was never before possible. They've been able to move from the margins into the mainstream because they can post their poison on message boards, in chat rooms, tweet it out, and live stream it in ways that, again, they just couldn't do a few years ago. That's why technology companies need to exercise more responsibility to make sure that their platforms are safe for all their users.
There was a cartoon that the New York Times is now apologizing for, showing the president wearing a pair of sunglasses and being led by a dog, depicted as Benjamin Netanyahu. They're apologizing for what they did acknowledge was an offensive cartoon, including anti-Semitic tropes. I know that you felt very passionately about that, so much so you issued tweets of your own saying this is offensive. What was published by the New York Times, anti-Semitic propaganda, you called it, of the most vile sort. You went on to say this is the type of content that normalizes anti-Semitism by reinforcing tropes of Jewish control, and does so at a time when anti-Semitism is surging.
Yes, I would say a few things about that. First, let's not call it a cartoon. It's propaganda, pure and simple. It looked like it was lifted from the pages of Der Stürmer, or the kind of thing that would be printed by the Islamic Republic in Iran. It doesn't belong in any mainstream American publication, certainly not the New York Times. Number two, it reminds us that anti-Semitism comes in many forms. We were just talking about new media. You also see it in traditional media. Sometimes it's overt chants of Jews will not replace us in Charlottesville. Sometimes it's thinly veiled like this, supposedly criticism of Israel, but it's anti-Semitism, pure and simple. Now, yeah, I tweeted, because we feel so strongly about this, but the ADL doesn't just tweet, we act. So we've been engaged with the management of the New York Times, the editorial staff.
That was
of the New
the
York
second
Times.
apology,
Yes.
and I want to be clear that they issued a second apology that said that they were deeply sorry and said that the paper is committed to making sure nothing like this ever happens again. They also called it dangerous. They did say that in the new apology that the decision to run the syndicated cartoon was made by a single editor working without adequate oversight.
So I spoke to management at the Times before that second apology, and I explained to them clearly, an apology is not enough. We need action and accountability. That means policies and procedures need to change. That means they need to not only own up to what they've done, they need to get out in front of this. Just imagine the man who murdered Lori Kay in by this idea of Jewish control, Jewish manipulation, exactly the kind of image that the New York Times printed just a few hours earlier.
Jonathan, we're going to have to say goodbye, but thanks very much for coming in today.
Jonathan Greenblatt, thank you.
For having me.
Actress Lori Loughlin, her husband, and 15 other parents expected to plead not guilty as a hearing gets underway moments from now in the college cheating scandal. A live update on that coming up.
A lot happening there, plus early signs of a generational showdown as Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders gear up for quite the battle. But the Trump campaign saying it is ready for 2020 no matter who the nominee is. Sean Spicer is today's headliner, and he will join us next.
Obviously, we have to go back and win Michigan again, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. We plan on also being in Minnesota very soon. I think New Mexico is in play in 2020. I think New Hampshire. I think we continue to grow the map.
Vice President Joe Biden heading to battleground Pennsylvania today for his first rally since jumping into the race for the White House. Biden also heads to Iowa later this week as he puts a focus on blue-collar working-class voters. Former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer with some brand new reactions straight ahead. But first, let's go to Peter Doocy. He's live in Pittsburgh, where Biden will hold his rally. Peter.
John, Joe Biden's first big campaign event also comes with his first big labor endorsement. It's from the International Association of Firefighters, which represents more than 316,000 firefighters and paramedics.
The endorsement of the IFF was approved because Joe Biden will be a champion for the public's safety in America, fighting for policies and legislation that improve the lives and livelihoods of not just firefighters, but all who work for a living.
Joe Biden's focus so far has been on the general election swing state of Pennsylvania, while President Trump's focus this weekend was on the general election swing state of Wisconsin.
Can you imagine Sleepy Joe, Crazy Bernie?
Today's the first chance for members of the public to attend a Biden 2020 event since last week's launch day featured a private fundraiser at a Comcast executive's house. But Biden wants to clear the air about all those big checks, tweeting this: "I've said it before and I'll say it again. To speak to the middle class, we need to reject the super PAC system." That's exactly what this campaign is doing. The Democratic frontrunner's campaign is all about condemning President Trump, which is something Biden tried to do in Pittsburgh in 2016, on the trail with the man he hoped would succeed him as VP, Tim Kaine.
We can't elect a man who belittles our closest allies and embraces Vladimir Putin.
That strategy of just going after President Trump as the main focus failed here in Pennsylvania in 2016 because President Trump won the state and its 20 electoral votes. But the Biden team is trying something very similar this time around. John?
All right, Peter Doocy. Peter, thank you.
Let's bring in today's headliner, Sean Spicer, a former White House press secretary and a senior advisor and spokesperson for America First PAC. Sean, good morning to you, and thanks for being here.
Good morning. Thank you.
All right. So Joe Biden, he's got the early lead. He's officially in. How do you think it's going so far based on what you've seen?
I think it's way too early to tell. Joe Biden's the 20th candidate. Who knows how many more are getting in, upwards of 10 additional ones. Look, he's winning largely because of name ID and because of his time in connection to President Obama, who continues to be extremely popular with the Democratic base. But you've got 20 candidates, each taking shots at each other, a series of debates that are just a couple months away. And when that really starts to happen, we'll see where this thing breaks out. It's interesting. You got Joe Biden, who was first elected to the Senate in 1973, first ran for president in 1988, and then you've got at the other end of the spectrum Pete Buttigieg, who was 9 years after Biden first got elected to the Senate before he would even be born. You've got a pretty big swath of individuals age-wise running. The two folks at the top of the sphere now, Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, are over 70 years old, and then you've got a lot of younger folks in the Democratic Party as well. We'll see where this breaks out, though, but I think you're going to see a lot of ups and downs before this nomination is clinched.
President Trump does not seem particularly perturbed by Joe Biden's joining the race. Here's what he told Maria Bartiromo on Sunday Morning Futures.
I think Biden has been exposed. I don't know what the hell happened to Biden. I never saw that before. I don't know. It just doesn't look like the same Biden. I said, is that really Joe Biden? He doesn't look the same to me. I've known him for a long time. I've seen him for a long time. I said, what happened to him? So he's been exposed because he's very weak. He doesn't want to talk about this.
A lot of Democrats think that Joe Biden is the guy who can beat President Trump, Sean.
Look, I think a lot of Democrats just want anyone who can beat Trump. But, again, you look back at the president's accomplishments. We saw just last week GDP numbers come in higher than expected. Job creation continues to do very well. This president has done what he said he was going to do, and he's going to run on a record of accomplishment. He won 306 electoral votes. States like Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin that the GOP hadn't put in its column since 1988. So I don't think the president's too worried about who's going to win. The biggest problem for the Democratic Party, to be honest with you, is that these elections are going to come down to a big binary choice, a contrast. And the Democrats, all 20 of them, are continued to run to the far left socialism extreme, drawing a huge connection between a president that has accomplishments and a Democratic Party that has crept further and further to the extreme left.
Not all of them are touting socialism, but some of them are. Here's the latest polling, ABC Washington Post poll on 2020 choice for Democrats. So far, Joe Biden, as we've been discussing, leading the pack early on at 17% to Bernie Sanders 11%. The generational divide is what gets very interesting when you break the polling down by age, Sean. Those aged 18 to 29 years old go for Bernie Sanders. And those over 50 largely go for Joe Biden. Look at that, 27% to Bernie Sanders, 6%.
The funny thing, I've always found this fascinating because Bernie had this same kind of issue last cycle, which is here is this, older gentleman that believes in socialism that's really attractive to young people. I've had the opportunity over the last year to visit several college campuses, and I always ask a lot of the students, who do you want? And they're still, by and large, really want Bernie. So it's this interesting contrast that they get younger, new generation, hipper candidates, and they still want to go with the old white guy.
Yeah, because Pete Buttigieg, for instance, he's doing surprisingly well to a lot of people. I mean, the mayor of South Bend isn't exactly a nationally known figure, but he's generally number 3 in the Democratic polls. He is the guy that one would think the young vote would be flocking to.
See, this is where I think a lot of folks continue, at least from an analysis standpoint, they look at the different demographics of who's running for president on the Democratic side and try to assume that based on that, that's where they're going with. Again, when I talk to young people, it's because of the issues that Bernie champions that they're in support of. And I think that too often we've tried to look at the Democratic race through the lens of what demographic do they fit, what gender do they, are they, what color are they, what's their ethnic background, as opposed to what are their big issues, because that's where I think you see a lot of energy in the Democratic Party focused on people who are championing those big issues, climate change.
What is it that Bernie espouses that you think young people love so much?
I think this idea of equality and socialism that he has embraced, Medicare for all, free student aid, all of that stuff sounds very attractive to young people, and it's where there's a lot of energy. But Bernie's gone around talking about this for decades, and I think for a lot of these students, they think that that's a great idea.
As for how President Trump's campaign for 2020 plans to run against that, here's Brad Parscale.
In every single metric, we're looking at being bigger, better and badder than we were in 2016. But this time, we're not out there trying to prove we can do something. The president has proved he has done it, and now we just have to deliver what he's done.
Bigger, better, badder than they were in 2016. What does that look like? Final thoughts from you, Sean.
It means that, again, these elections are going to come to getting out your folks, and data and ground game are going to be more important than ever before. The combination of this Trump campaign, this message, this candidate with the Republican National Committee's ground game and data operation have only grown stronger since 2016, and I think are going to give an insurmountable edge when it comes down to it in these key states. We won Michigan by 0.22, 10,700 votes. Pennsylvania by 0.44, 40,000 votes. That kind of operation is what gives you the edge in these battleground states, and I think it's going to put us over the top again this cycle.
Brett, he was making the case that they could flip 4 left-leaning states this time around with that bigger, badder campaign that they're promising. Sean Spicer, great to have you here this morning. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
All right.
Meantime, the Apple Corporation is accused of cracking down on apps that are designed to limit our iPhone usage. Details on that straight ahead.
Plus, President Trump taking to the campaign trail and touting the strong, robust economy, why his message has top Democrats concerned. Charles Payne will be here on all of that next.
I promise at the end of 6 years, I'll be very happy, but you're going to be left with the strongest country you've ever had. I promise you.
Which investment?
And we're now the #1 economy anywhere in the world, and it's not even close. Remember, President Obama said manufacturing jobs are gone. You need a wand, a magic wand. We found the magic wand because they're coming, and they're coming fast. They're all coming back, all of them. And the era of economic surrender is over.
President Trump touting a strong U.S. economy during a campaign rally in Wisconsin this weekend. He says it'll be a winning message for 2020. Let's bring in our money man, Charles Payne, host of Making Money on Fox Business
There he is. Hey, Charles.
There's no doubt about it. You know, it's interesting because over the weekend there's been a lot of talk that within the Democratic Party there's an acknowledgement that, hey, can we really win on, you know, anti-Trump, that, you know, the old Trump bad? Can you just put that on the bumper sticker when people actually are working and there's no cohesive economic message? In the meantime, yeah, President Trump is starting to fill out these stadiums again, touting the fact that everyone in that audience has a job, and most of them, or a lot of them, certainly didn't have a job a couple years ago.
Here's the Politico headline: Dems sweat Trump's economy. We don't really have a robust national message right now. One top Democrat fears that could be a recipe for disaster in 2020.
I'm thinking back to one of my favorite Twilight Zone episodes. You're a bad man. You're a very bad man. Like, is that going to win the White House for the Dems? I'm not sure. They do need a cohesive message.
Normally,
unless they can wish them out into the cornfield.
Normally, when people go into the voting booth, the economy trumps every other issue.
The only thing I will say is that people are starting to take it for granted, right? So when you see these polls and it's immigration #1 and this #2, the irony of that, of course, is when we do have a job, we can sometimes put it on the back burner in the thought that, hey, we can take this for granted. But if people seriously think about it before pulling the lever, the Dems better come up with a strategy.
All right, address this strategy on the part of Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris. She is calling for a ban of right-to-work laws, describing them as an attack on workers' rights, Charles.
It's scary, and I got to tell you, this dovetails with the talk of removing the Electoral College. I mean, essentially what you have Democrats talking about right now, taking away states' rights. This is an all-out assault on states. And as far as this right-to-work states, you got 27 right-to-work states. 7 of the top 10 states with the best unemployment rates are right-to-work states. And by the way, several of them are swing states: Florida, Iowa, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Virginia, Wisconsin. Do you want to go in these states, Wisconsin, with a 2.9% unemployment rate, and say, we want to take away your right to work? Do you want to go in Virginia with a 2.9% unemployment rate, a swing state? Do they want to go to Iowa with a 2.4% unemployment rate and say, we want to take away the thing that actually created this sort of prosperity for you?
And the states are supposed to be laboratories for innovation and other things that, you know, eventually can trickle their way up to the federal government.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it.
Michigan and Virginia have been battling those right-to-work laws for years. All right, Apple. What is happening here? Because there's a New York Times story about these companies who say that they are apps that help cut down on screen time or limit screen time. That they're saying that Apple has taken them off of their ability to buy them on iTunes.
They say 11 of the 17, the most downloaded apps that do this thing, either parental controls or to sort of limit your time, 11 of the top 7 most downloaded ones have either been removed or severely mitigated by Apple. And what's really adds a lot more intrigue and hypocrisy to this story is that Tim Cook has been a crusader, you know, for people limiting screen time and for the invasion of privacy and the abuse of power in Silicon Valley. This is a real ugly story for Apple. They're going to have to get on top of it. I know they probably have already sent out a few messages to reporters on this.
So the problem would be the public persona is that we want to help you cut down on screen time, especially children. But behind the scenes, maybe they're doing away with companies that actually help users do that.
I mean, you know, listen, screen time means that we need the product more and endears us more to the product. Naturally, you would think a company would want us to be hooked on this, but Tim Cook wants it both ways.
They acknowledged it in a statement. It's on their website, by the way.
Good,
they didn't respond to that story. All right, Charles Payne, thank you.
You got it.
Court action, meanwhile, this morning in the college admissions scandal amid reports that one of the actresses involved, Lori